From secretary to CEO to Senate candidate, Carly Fiorina is one of the most recognizable leaders in America today. She began her career as a secretary and 20 years later became the first woman to lead a Fortune 50 company. Under her leadership, the company doubled in revenue, generated 11 patents per day, and led the market for all of its product categories. Carly's leadership insights emanate from a distinctive, thoughtful, yet practical point of view. She's gone on to leverage her skill and experience as an innovator in the nonprofit realm, a best-selling author, a political commentator, and a business strategy expert. Let's welcome Carly Fiorina back to the summit stage.
Good morning. Good morning. It's so wonderful to be back here at Willow and at the Leadership Summit. You know, every time I hear an intro like that, it's, of course, very gracious, but it all sounds sort of smooth. And life isn't smooth. Life isn't smooth for any of us. So before I begin my talk, which is, as you might expect, about leadership, I want to just tell you a little bit more about myself. Don't worry, I'll be brief. But all of us learn life's lessons from living life. So I want to tell you a little bit about mine. When I was 8 years old, don't worry, this won't go through every year. When I was 8, my mother was my Sunday school teacher, a little awkward, but I remember her handing to me and the other students in her class a little plaque. And the plaque said, "What you are is God's gift to you. What you make of yourself is your gift to God." And my parents talked to me often about my gifts. What were my gifts? I have to tell you honestly, I did not feel like a gifted child. Everybody seemed smarter than me. I was an obedient, goody two-shoes middle child. Eventually, I go off to college. I graduate with a degree in medieval history and philosophy. All dressed up, nowhere to go. So I go to law school, apologies to the lawyers in the room, hate law school, quit after one semester, and go back to work doing what I had done to help put myself through school. I went back to work as a full-time secretary for a little 9-person firm. And one day, about 6 months in, 2 men in that little 9-person company came to my desk and said, "You know, we've been watching you, and we think maybe you could do more than type and file. Do you want to learn about what we do? Do you want to learn about business?" That was my first introduction to business, and that gesture, that act by those 2 men changed my life. They saw possibilities in me, and so I saw different possibilities for myself. I went on, as you know, eventually became the chief executive of Hewlett-Packard, a company I had the privilege to lead for 6 years. I've been involved in politics. Today I chair 2 major nonprofits, one based right here in Chicago, Opportunity International, Christian-based, largest microfinance organization in the world. We've lent $6 billion. Our starter loans are $150. And I have seen people with the kind of support and training and just a little bit of help and money completely transform their lives and the lives of their families and their communities from circumstances of desperation and destitution. And I chair another nonprofit called Good 360. We are the largest product donation marketplace in the world. We take excess inventory from companies, of which there is a lot, and instead of it ending up in a landfill, we distribute it to 37,000 charities across this country. And I have seen the look in a child's eyes when he or she gets a brand new backpack filled with brand new cool stuff, because it isn't stuff to them. I battled cancer. We lost our younger daughter several years ago. So like all of you, yes, I've had triumphs in my life, but I've also had tragedies and hard times. And through every one of those good times and bad times, I always knew I was not alone. Through all those experiences, so many different kinds of experiences, politics, non-for-profits, business, personal hardship, family hardship, I've learned a couple really basic things. One of those things is that leadership is the same no matter what the context is, whether it's a church or a business or a charity. But let me start with the most important lesson of all the way back to that plaque my mother gave me. What you are is God's gift to you. What you make of yourself is your gift to God. The truth is that everyone has potential. The truth is that everyone has more potential than most of us realize. The truth is every organization has more potential than is ever tapped or used or fulfilled. In fact, if you think about it, human potential is the one, the only limitless resource we have in this world. But it is truly limitless, and it is amazing what happens when human potential is unlocked, untapped, focused on worthy goals and common purpose. Why do people fail to realize their potential? So many of us fail to fulfill our full potential. Why is that? Well, sometimes it's because people are afraid to take a chance, afraid to take a risk. Sometimes it's because people never have the chance because of subjugation or deprivation. Sometimes people have the chance, but perhaps they don't have the tools, they don't have the training, they don't have the education, they don't have the opportunity. Sometimes it's because, honestly, people lose faith. They lose faith in themselves, they lose faith in others, they lose faith in God. There are things that crush potential. Bill Hybels was talking earlier about the kind of managers that crush the spirit and thus crush potential. But what are some other things that crush potential? Let's start with bureaucracy. Bureaucracy in any setting, politics, business, charities. Bureaucracy crushes potential. Why? Because the people who work inside a bureaucracy, which is, after all, a rules-based, process-driven, hierarchical organization, people who work within that bureaucracy get the message. And what's the message in a bureaucracy? Follow the rules. Stick to the process. For heaven's sake, don't use your judgment or take a risk. If you've got a tough call, send it up the line. It crushes the potential of people inside a bureaucracy, and bureaucracies always turn in on themselves. They start to have turf battles. They start to worry and argue and scheme over all the stuff that goes on inside. But worse than that, bureaucracies forget who they are there to serve. A business bureaucracy will forget its customers. A government bureaucracy will forget its veterans. Bureaucracies crush potential of the people inside them and the people they are intended to serve. It's important to think about. If human potential is the one, the only limitless resource we have, the one, the only limitless resource that can really solve problems and tap opportunities, if that resource is human potential, and if we know the things that crush it, fear, subjugation, bureaucracies, what unlocks it? What unlocks it? Because everything I know from my life, every experience I have ever had tells me, has proven to me, that when you get human potential untapped, when you focus it on a common goal and motivate it to achieve a worthy purpose, everything truly is possible. And there are so many examples that we learn every year here at the summit of exactly that happening. What unlocks potential? Leadership. Leadership. In fact, the highest calling of leadership is to unlock the potential of others. Now let me explain a bit, because it may not be the definition of leadership you were expecting. People get real confused about leadership, in my opinion. We call a lot of people leaders who are not leaders at all. So let's talk for a moment about what it actually is and what it is not. Let's start with what it is not. Leadership is not management. Management is really important. But what is management? Management in any setting, management is the production of acceptable results within known constraints and conditions. Management is the production of acceptable results within known constraints and conditions. It's important to have good managers. And a good manager can be a leader, and a leader can be a manager, but management and leadership are not the same. In a business setting, I would describe the differences this way. A good manager produces good results within known constraints and conditions. Whatever the competitive environment is, you produce good results within that environment. A leader says, I'm going to change these conditions. I'm going to change the position of my organization. Leadership actually is about changing the order of things. What's another thing that management is not? Well, when I was a secretary, I thought the guy in the corner office was a leader. And as I made my way up in big bureaucracies in corporate America, I continued to think, well, the guy, by the way, they were mostly guys, the guy in the corner office must be the leader. And then I figured out that there were lots of people in corner offices who had never led a day in their lives. And I saw other people who had no office, no perks, no titles, no big budgets, no big organizations, who were leading every day. I think of some of the women we serve in Opportunity International, women in desperate and destitute circumstances who become entrepreneurs, who imagine a different future, who say to themselves, I am here, I want to go there, to quote Bill Hybels, and who take resources and lead because they change the order of things for themselves by becoming entrepreneurs, for their families by choosing to invest those resources in their children's education, for their communities. That is leadership. Leaders change the order of things, and it does not matter if they have a title or not. Now, if you doubt that, let's think about some examples. Leadership is not about position and title and power. Leadership is not the same as management. Leadership is about changing the order of things, and in particular, the highest calling of leadership is to unlock the potential in others. Let's imagine a few examples of people that we know were leaders. Martin Luther King. He changed the world, he changed the face of this nation, but he started as nothing. Just a pastor who had a dream of a there that was so different than where he was. And he did not start by negotiating with the people in power. No, he started by unlocking the potential in lots of other nobodies. The potential to see, to understand that an injustice had to be fixed, that a wrong had to be righted. Nelson Mandela, Bill Hybels referred to him earlier. He was not a leader because he became president. He became president because he was a leader. And he led as worse than a nobody. He led as a criminal in a jail cell, and by the time he came out of that jail, people already knew this is a leader. Not because he had a title, not because he had position, but because he was determined to change the order of things. And once again, he unlocked the potential in others, because leaders never accomplish anything worthwhile acting on their own. He unlocked the potential in others to change the face of his nation. Jesus. Is there any more obvious a symbol of powerlessness than a baby in a manger? Jesus was a nobody, and he recruited other nobodies. And he went among the poor not because he felt sorry for them. He went among the poor because he knew the potential they had. People are not poor because they lack potential. People are poor because they do not have an opportunity, for whatever reason, to fulfill their potential. And if all those examples I just gave you maybe feel too big or too far away, then pause and consider just for one moment how you got here, why you are here. And among other reasons, you are here because a young man several decades ago sold tomatoes, started a ministry, and decided to unlock the potential in others for leadership. Leadership is not about position, title, power, big budgets. There are lots of people who have those things who call themselves leaders, and they do not lead. Leadership is about changing the order of things. The highest calling of leadership is to unlock the potential in others. So, what do leaders do? If that's what leadership is, what do leaders do? Now, I'll tell you another thing that people get confused about, in my opinion. People think that a great speech is leadership. And by the way, a good speech is really important to leadership. A fiery sermon sometimes absolutely is required to define for people where there is, or to cast a vision, as Bill would say, or to, in my words, to explain to people why our current state is not sustainable and we must head towards a future state that is better. Sometimes words, communication, speeches, exhortations are really important, but they are not enough. And in fact, I believe the most important acts of leadership are not the words. So what do leaders do? Well, this easel is up here because I'm going to draw you a kind of a simple picture, but it's how I think about the act of leadership, what it actually takes to lead. And I'm going to draw a square. And I call this the leadership, sorry, this is a big fat pen, hard to write with, leadership framework. And the sides of this square, in my experience, define the dimensions of leadership. What leaders must do. So let's start at the top. There are various words for this: strategy, goals, vision. Where are we going? Where are we going? And why are we going there? The where is important. The why is important. The how is important. And these are things that the leader must define. Whether it is leadership on a humble scale, I am going to build a better life for myself and my family. Or the vision is on a grand scale, I am going to go change the face of my nation. And the more specific and clear the goals and the vision and the strategy is, the better. In fact, I tend to take teams through an exercise where We will define a current state. Where are we now? Very specifically. And where do we want to be? Very specifically. Because as I'll speak about in a couple minutes, measuring whether you're getting there is incredibly important to actually achieving the goals that a leader sets out. So, where are we going? Why are we going there? How are we going to get there? Why is it better than where we are? Second part of the framework. Organization, team, structure, process. All words for how are we going to work together to get this work done? Who's on the team? Who's the senior leader? How will we structure ourselves? What kinds of processes are important? And the thing is, what you see in a lot of organizations is this doesn't match this. There's structures and processes that are in place that are at odds with the goal. Or you'll see frequently organizations where there's lots going on in organizing, but it's not driven by goals. So I'll tell you two quick stories. When I first arrived at HP, we were a big, complicated organization, and our customers were telling us, we want to buy systems from you, collections of products that work together. That was a good strategy. It was a good goal. The only trouble was we were organized into 87 separate business units. So guess what? We didn't work very well together, and we couldn't deliver a system. So if we said that we wanted to be a systems company, we couldn't stay as 87 business units. Pretty obvious, right? Now I'll give you the flip. Organizations where a lot goes on around structure and process, but it's not driven by any vision of the future. I see heads nodding. You've been in places like that. Funny joke, I remember, my dad actually told me this joke. It could apply to any setting, but in this particular case, it was a university president, and it comes time for him to retire. So he welcomes his successor into his office, and he says, to help you out in your early tenure here, I've left you 3 envelopes. And when you come across trouble, you open each one of these envelopes in turn. Okay, everything's great. The successor hits their first roadblock. They open the first envelope. The envelope reads, blame your predecessor. He does. It works. Everybody goes, yeah, that's right. It was the other guy. It's his fault. Okay, things go along. Comes the next roadblock. He opens the second envelope. The second envelope reads, reorganize. How many organizations do you know that reorganize? It is an illusion of progress. Let's reorganize things. And for a while, people think that they're getting something done. But the reorganization has nothing to do with strategy. It's not guided by any set of goals or vision. You've heard the old expression, rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. But it works for a while. Yeah, we're doing something. We're reorganizing. The successor hits the third roadblock, opens the last envelope. The envelope reads, prepare 3 envelopes. The point is that it is very important for leaders to decide, how will I structure my team? Who is on my team? How will I develop my team? How will I organize my team to get work done? What kinds of processes will help us? If we are a bureaucracy that is crushing the potential of our employees and failing to serve those we are here to serve, then we have to decentralize decision-making in a radical way. Washington, are you listening? But structure always should follow strategy. You have to know why you're doing what you're doing. Okay, third. Metrics, results. How are we going to measure progress? How are we going to reward success? What counts as progress. I believe that in any organization, what gets measured is what gets done. It does not matter the purpose of the organization. What gets measured is what gets done, because people see what is being measured and they say to themselves, that's what's important. They're measuring it, so it must be important. And so how measurements are decided gets to be really important. How success is defined has a lot to do with whether or not success is achieved. Are we measuring customer satisfaction? Are we measuring lives transformed? Are we measuring people lifted out of poverty? What are we measuring? What are we rewarding? And finally, perhaps the hardest thing, but the most important thing: culture, behavior. Bill talked about the importance of culture and the importance of a leader setting the culture. Culture is sometimes kind of a fancy word that people get a little confused about. I think culture means, what's it like to work around here? And therefore, it all boils down to behavior. Because here's the thing that I know about people. People will listen to the talk for a while. And then they'll stop listening to the talk and they will start walking the walk. Watching the walk. Watching to see, what is the walk? In other words, you've heard the old aphorism, but it's so true in leadership. Actions speak louder than words. And so the tough questions for any organization occur when an organization says it holds certain values in high esteem, but then doesn't act that way. How many organizations that you're aware of have, for example, somewhere in your code of conduct, highest standards of integrity, ethics? Well, people want that to be true. But if one day somebody in the organization steps kind of close to the line to produce results that an organization values, let's say quarterly earnings, just to pick one, and the results get produced and nobody says anything about the action close to the line, what happens? The next quarter, doesn't matter whether we're talking about a church or a charity or a business. What happens the next quarter, people get a little closer to the line. And one day, somebody's going to step over the line. And if nothing happens, people get the message. They get the message that no matter what our code of conduct says, you know what? We don't care about that stuff. It's just talk. The walk is, you better produce. The hardest decision I ever made as a chief executive was to fire a direct report, a person of great potential, someone that I hoped would be my successor. But his behavior was something that we would not tolerate in a lower level employee. And so if we wanted anyone to believe what we said about the culture we were trying to build, then we had to walk the walk and he had to go. In this dimension of leadership in particular, the leader has to set the tone. He or she has to model the behavior. Because in the end, actions always speak louder than words. And you can have all the codes of conduct you want and all the fancy value statements on the wall, but in the end, people gather and say, what's it like to work around here? How do people behave and how do I feel? This is the leadership framework. It's pretty basic. But I believe that any leader who wants to get from here to there, who wants to go from the current state as they have defined it, hopefully with specificity to the future state, has to set this frame. And then, very importantly, I believe you set the frame and you set people free. You set people free to operate within this framework, within this set of parameters, so that they can fulfill their potential. You do not dictate every move. You do not tell them every single thing they have to figure out. Set the frame and set them free. Because an organization cannot achieve its potential unless the people inside it achieve theirs. We all need to understand the parameters within which we can operate, but once we understand them, progress, innovation, creativity happens when people can figure it out. One final word about this. It's what I call the 20-20 rule. When people embark on leadership, a leadership journey, it's important to remember the 20-20 rule. Here's what it is, 20%. 20% of the people in most organizations, in my experience, no matter what kind of organization it is, 20% of people are what I call change warriors. I don't call them change agents, because change is a battle sometimes. They're change warriors. They're people who get it right away. Yes, I want to go from here to there. Harness those warriors, identify those warriors, enlist those warriors. And they are all throughout the organization. Age has nothing to do with it. Position has nothing to do with it. They're people who thrive on forward momentum and change. 20%. There's another 20%. They're what I call, I won't go. I'm not going. For whatever reason. I'm not going. I'm done learning in my life. I'm exhausted. I don't believe the vision. I don't really want to be here. They're just not going. And ultimately, they need to be identified too, and something has to be done to resolve the situation. But in the meantime, they become the source of resistance. And that leaves what? 60% of the people. What are 60% of the people? They're skeptics. They're waiting. They're trying to see, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? And guess what? Change never happens. Successful change never happens unless the 60% are moved. The skeptics have to get engaged. And when they do, when 80% of the folks are engaged, then forward momentum is possible. Everyone has more potential than they realize. And in particular, I know that everyone has the capacity to lead. Leaders are made, not born. Leadership is not some mysterious thing that's only available to a few. Leadership is changing the order of things. Leadership, the highest calling of leadership, is to unlock the potential of others. Leadership's about making a positive difference. And so, if you think about that definition of leadership, the bottom line is that leadership is a profoundly human gift. And it is available to us all. All of us have the potential to change the order of things, to make a positive difference, to unlock the potential in someone else. All of us have the potential to lead. Now, I will say one last thing about leadership. It's something I've thought a lot about over the last couple of years. I believe that true leadership requires faith. And I do not say that to dismiss in any way people who have doubts. I have had my doubts in my life. Nor do I say that to be disrespectful to those who look at the world around them and say, how can I possibly believe in God when I see the world in the state that it is in? But I think, honestly, a love of God makes leadership easier. And I say that because faith gives us the gift of humility. And leadership, true leadership, requires a leader to understand that it is not about us. It is not about us. It is about others. And a true leader approaches their task with a servant's heart. I think faith gives us the gift of empathy, so that we all know that I could be where this person is. I could have the difficulties that this person has. Faith gives us the gift of optimism. A leader must know that things can be better, that a positive difference can be made, that people will rise to the occasion. And I think that is the most important gift of all, to have faith in others. Someone once asked me, don't you have to have a lot of confidence in yourself to be a leader? I said, yes, but more importantly than that, you must have a lot of faith in others. You must know that people can rise to the occasion, will rise to the occasion, will, if given the opportunity, use their potential to make a positive difference. Faith teaches us that every one of us is equal. No one of us is better than any other, that all of us are gifted by God. And that knowledge propels a leader. Ultimately, like faith, I think, leadership is a choice. Leadership can be learned by anyone. There are lots of reasons why people choose not to lead. Maybe they're afraid. Resistance is tough. Criticism is worse sometimes. Maybe they're exhausted. There is no question that leaders are sorely tested. But I must tell you, and you know this, there is a look that people get in their eyes when their potential has been unlocked. There's a look that people get when they achieve something that is beyond what they thought was possible. That look, it's the same everywhere in the world. It's the same for every person. That look is all the repayment a leader needs. So I would close by saying this to you. Leadership is a choice. Choose to lead. Choose to change the order of things. Choose to fulfill your own potential for leadership and choose the joy of unlocking the potential in others. What you are, what we all are, is God's gift to you. What you make of yourself, what we all make of ourselves, is our gift to God. Make of yourself leaders. Thank you so much.